such as the patriarchs, the Exodus, the Davidic monarchy, or the advent of the Messiah. Both Adon Olam and the Aleinu are equally applicable to all worshipers of the one Creator God. In fact, the second part of the Aleinu looks forward to the establishment of God's kingship on earth. This, however, demands the turning of the wicked to God. The wicked are not eliminated, they are only transformed. When all humanity turns to God, then the prophecy of Zechariah will be fulfilled, that the one God will reign over all the earth. For in that day God will be one, and his name one, that is, one for all. Instructively, the two parts of the Aleinu both begin and end with the Hebrew letters Ayin and Daled. They spell out the word aid, which means witness. Together they constitute a set of witnesses. When we bring about the monotheization and the ethnicization of humanity, we act as God's witnesses. As the prophet Isaiah declared, "You are my witnesses, and I am the one God," says the Lord, which is interpreted by the Jewish tradition to mean, when you are my witnesses, I am God, and when not, then as if I am not. The mandate of witnessing to a God of goodness is the burden of the Abrahamic family. As a witness in a court makes something real, our witnessing to God makes the one God real in the world. Let us do it together as Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Kimmelman. Michael Yaffe.
Respected colleagues, I want to begin by thanking the Forum for promoting peace, Sheikh Abdullah Baiban, and our host government, our host country, for inviting me to this gathering. This is my first time at the Forum. Usually my colleague at the U.S. Institute of Peace, Reverend Susie Hayward, attends these forums but was not able to do so this week. She extends her fond regards to everybody, especially to Sheikh Abdullah, and hopes that she'll be able to join the discussion next year. I approach the subject of this panel on religious pluralism and civil peace, not as a theologian, but as a practitioner of peace building. In this case, as a peace builder who incorporates the promotion of religious pluralism in my work at the U.S. Institute of Peace. If there is one defining and common feature to USIP's approach in building peace on the ground in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, and in South America, it is the concept of inclusive societies. Inclusive societies is also the central pillar of this forum, the Alliance of Virtues, and the Marrakesh Declaration, among others. Religion has an important role to play in creating inclusive societies. With 84% of the people worldwide identifying with a faith tradition, religion influences local, national, and international decision-making. When it comes to building sustainable peace, the solution includes respecting the rights, empowering the communities, and addressing the interests of minority populations while balancing the interests and the will of the majority. This is relevant whether we're talking about religious minorities, ethnic minorities, racial minorities, ideological minorities, and interest group minorities. Including women in the political arena and the religious and civil society dialogues is also critical for obtaining an inclusive society. Exclusion from the political process and denial of state societal resources and security, especially when it's relative to the majority, are key factors leading to violent conflict, displaced persons, poverty, and corruption. Disrespecting minorities, limiting religious freedom, and ignoring the rule of law are particularly problematic in fragile states, which are already dealing with a host of issues that are threatening governance stability. When the United States was formed as a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious nation-state, united by a common creed of liberty, the authors of the country's current Constitution in 1787 devoted much of their time grappling with the question of how to deal with the minority interests within a heretofore untested system of governance. They feared that every decision would be based on majority rule to the disregard of minority interest, a winner-take-all mobocracy. It was viewed as a recipe for instability. Minorities would not be sufficiently invested in the political system, their voices persistently ignored, and their liberties in doubt. Over time, these grievances would grow, and they would likely rebel and perhaps recourse to violence. To address this problem, the drafters of the Constitution proposed opening up the political and civil space to provide unhindered access to all interest groups, all with equal status. They developed a competitive, inclusive system infused with the ambition of striving towards complete tolerance for minority views and religious pluralism. USIP's work in promoting the prevention, the mitigation, and the reduction and the resolution of violent conflict is heavily influenced by this inclusive approach. In Iraq, where USIP has been operating continuously since 2003, our focus has been on resolving differences peacefully through reconciliation. Many of our initiatives center on fostering inclusion of Iraqi religious minorities in the political process. Failing to respect and address the needs of these minorities sets up the conditions for further grievances and injustices, the very conditions that violent extremist groups exploit to grow their movements. We seek to deny them that space. Specifically, we work with the Alliance of Iraqi Minorities, AIM is the acronym, to advance the rights of Iraqis' religious minorities at the local and national levels and facilitate their working together to address intercommunal disagreements. The Alliance includes representatives from 20 Iraqi civil society organizations that support Yazidis, Shabaks, Christians, and other religious and ethnic groups. In the Nineveh Plain and Western Nineveh, located in northern Iraq, AIM and the other local peace-building organizations bring together key governmental officials, political and tribal authorities, and religious communities for reconciliation dialogues. Our primary focus is on minority groups that have been most severely affected by ISIS attacks, particularly the Yazidis and the Christians. In Bartella, we focus on tensions between two communities, Christians and Shabaks. This work has resulted in each community individually adopting a set of principles for peaceful coexistence. The two sets of principles will serve as a basis for a discussion for a mutual work plan that hopefully will be negotiated over the next few weeks. Getting to this point has taken years of consistent work with each community, building trust, and taking the time to develop a deep understanding of the people's perspective before getting to the dialogue talks. Reconciliation dialogues are also occurring throughout the country between Shia, Sunnis, and Kurds. The goals of these bottom-up dialogues generally are to reduce tensions, build resilience within the religious minority communities, inform government officials about the grievances and needs of these minorities, and enable the return of internally displaced persons by creating the conditions conducive for returning, especially with the provision of safety and welfare. A key component to our work revolves around implementation. Deliberating declarations, crafting action plans, and negotiating agreements are not enough. They must include measures for accountable follow-through if they are to be successful. Our work in Iraq is illustrative of what's involved in interfaith peacebuilding from the ground up. It requires careful planning, patience, persistence, presence, and most importantly, partnerships with local groups like the Alliance of Iraqi Minorities. Respecting religious pluralism is a key peace-building tool USIP employs across continents for engaging very different religious communities in unique and complicated political landscapes. In Sri Lanka, USIP worked with the Center for Peacebuilding and Reconciliation to form a coalition of 200 faith leaders from Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam to resolve local conflicts. In Nigeria, a peace accord in Yellow Sheldon was negotiated between former adversaries by an imam and a pastor who courageously formed a partnership, the Interfaith Mediation Center, that has been instrumental in promoting peace during the last decade. In Colombia, the Ecumenical Women Peace Buildings Network, a group of Catholic and Protestant women, advocated locally for the 2016 Peace Accord. In Pakistan, the Renaissance Foundation for Social Innovation organized dialogues across 20 university campuses on inter- and intra-religious violence and reconciliation. These are just a few examples of what is being done on the ground by local interfaith groups under the banner of religious pluralism to promote peace. Their work should be heralded, and I hope that the Alliance of Virtues will take that under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yaffe. I call now on Chris Seipel.
Good afternoon. I thought I would share a personal story of forgiveness and reconciliation, and then relate that to how we might think about and engage the humanitarian sphere, offering some lessons and some suggestions about how we move forward. I will do so based on my experiences in northern Iraq, working with many of the communities that Mike just mentioned, on the Nineveh Plain in particular, but also based on a book that I wrote 23 years ago on humanitarian interventions. When I was 11 years old, our embassy, I'm an American, our embassy in Iran was overrun. And I will never forget the photograph that became iconic symbolizing that event that was on the front page of our newspapers. And it was a photograph of Americans with blindfolds around them and at the mercy of their captors. As an 11-year-old, I did not know how to think about that. The Americans were the good guys. I had not yet traveled, I had not yet been in the Marine Corps, I had not studied these things, and all I can remember from those times was how quick the anger and even hatred came for somebody who would do something to my tribe. On September 12th, 2012, I found myself in Tunis. We were meeting with Islamist leaders from throughout the region. As I sat down for the conversation, I sat down next to a colleague from Libya, and then it was announced that the night before, our consulate in Benghazi had been overrun, and that our ambassador, Chris Stevens, had been murdered. The person next to me, his name was Walid, he put both of his hands on my forearm and said, "I'm sorry. That is not our Libya. That is not our Islam." We had some tense conversations that week, and I flew out Friday morning as our embassy in Tunis was overrun by violent Salafis. When I got home, I watched the footage on TV, and once again I experienced great anger and even hatred as I saw the black smoke and the black flag swirl above our embassy. Next day, I had a Should we follow orders or should we ignore the hotel? No? To be continued? Why don't we, well, it's okay? Why don't we continue? Thank you. I've been given 1 minute extra. There's grace for you. So the next day, I had a vision, and I don't say that lightly because I'm not a mystic. I'm not even a very good prayer person, to be honest. But here's what I saw. I saw the same billowing smoke and the billowing flag, the black flag. And then amidst the smoke, I saw that iconic picture from 1979 and the Americans with the blindfolds around their heads, hostage. And then behind that, as clear as day, I saw Isa al-Masih, Jesus the Messiah. And he had his arms open, and he was embracing the suffering and the sorrow and the sin of all parties in those situations. Not caring whether one was Persian or Arab or American, not caring who was right and who was wrong. Giving forgiveness when none had been asked, as he had done on the cross, seeking to reconcile all things to himself. Now, why share that? Well, I share it in the context of great humility because I think it is an important reminder that people who have some alleged experience, like many of us in multi-faith engagement and peace building, that anger and hatred can come quickly and can override the best of our faith, especially when we feel that we have been wronged. I also share that story with you because I need to be held accountable to the best of my faith if we are to defeat the worst of religion. I need you to know, especially my non-Christian brothers and sisters in humanity, to understand what I understand about Isa al-Masih, which is that I am commanded to love God, love neighbor, and love enemy, as much as I don't want to. Now, what does that have to do with the humanitarian sphere? Well, I think the humanitarian sphere, if any sphere in our global society is in need of one thing, it is the humanitarian sphere, and it's in need of reconciliation and forgiveness. It's in need of the skill sets and capacity to live together with our deepest and most irreconcilable differences. We have 68.5 million people on the planet today who have been forcibly displaced within their countries or who have fled their countries. We need to find new ways to enable them to continue to live in their countries and not overwhelm the social services of the countries and regions around them And that begins with reconciliation. So I want to share with you 3 lessons that I've learned from the book that I wrote a long time ago and my experiences in northern Iraq working with religious minorities, and then 3 suggestions for going forward. Lesson number 1, humanitarian aid is apolitical, but its implementation is not. When you do humanitarian aid, the decision about where, when, and why, and through whom you work is always going to empower some and disempower others. You need leaders who know how to think about the different interests and competing interests and values and how to reconcile them enough to move forward as a common community. Lesson number 2, every relief decision is a development decision, is a reconciliation decision. It's well known in the humanitarian world that a relief decision in an emergency context creates new patterns for development and stability post-conflict. But if we're not living with our deepest differences and religion is catalyzing war, we need to know how to think about new patterns that have reconciliation embedded from the very beginning. We need to be thinking about policies and programs that embed reconciliation, that harness self-interest, and above all, focus on things like trauma and moral injury and enabling women as peace builders. Lesson number 3. Okay, lesson number 3. If you're going to have policies and programs that embed reconciliation, you first need people that embody reconciliation, not just from a spiritual sense, but from a very practical sense. In my book, I called these people cat shepherds. In American English, we have a saying that working with NGOs or with elements of our government is like herding cats, moving them forward. Who are the cat shepherds that can oversee the policies and programs that embed reconciliation because they embody reconciliation? Now, as I wrap up, let me offer 3 suggestions that might become elements of a roadmap that Sheikh bin Baya has referenced earlier. One is I am more convinced than ever that we need to be reading each other's scriptures side by side as Abrahamic brothers and sisters. We need to understand not only what it says about engaging the other, but also what your Holy Scriptures say about reconciling with each other. And we might even consider having a day before the next conference to do that together as groups and have the text beforehand and wrestle with those things so I can understand my Muslim and Jewish brothers and sisters as they understand themselves and as they understand me. Because if we can't do the forgiveness and reconciliation, we're not going to go anywhere. Secondly, we need to have skill sets. I teach something called cross-cultural religious literacy. Literacy is not fluency. Literacy is not illiteracy. It is simply humility. It is trying to get the questions right in order to move forward. In my definition of cross-cultural religious literacy, there is scriptural literacy, where you know your own faith at its richest and deepest best about how to engage and respect and reconcile with the other. You know enough about your neighbors, not just to tolerate, but respect it. And then there's a cross-cultural literacy, which says all scriptural and religious literacy takes place and varies in different cultural contexts. What does it mean to get something done? And there also has to be skill sets that define what those things are, skill sets of evaluation, of communication, and of negotiation. These are things that can be taught and can be theologically grounded. We need to stop having people like me who have been experiencing these things by default, and we need to start having people who we are educating by design and not experiencing by default. That is where we have to go, with people who understand humanitarian theology, geopolitics, etc. Here's my final point. We need more conferences like this one. We need to be in relationship with each other. You will not remember what I say, but you will remember somebody that you meet at a coffee break. Conferences are excuses for coffee breaks to meet somebody that you otherwise would never meet. Use the coffee break to go to a meal, and then begin to understand the things about that person, the essence of their identity, such as my own story that I shared earlier about what gives them challenges and opportunities within their own faith tradition to engage and respect the other. This is what I think we need most as we think about the future of humanitarian operations, something that can bring us together in the context of some larger geopolitical challenges. Thank you.
I assure you, Chris, people will remember your speech. Alarming. Our final speaker, and I just want to say, after each speaker has finished, we will have a 1-minute lightning round so that anyone can add thoughts after having heard their colleagues. But our final speaker in this first round is His Excellency the Metropolitan Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Sheikh bin Baya brought us all together in this wonderful forum for promoting peace, and we are very grateful to you. You know, sometimes I think we need alarms in our lives. We need to hear that, and we need to wake up, even if it's fake news. It's needed. It's needed for our wonderful planet, where narratives thought dead have reappeared, and new narratives are sought from new generations. In a pluralistic society in which economic growth has become the dominant driver and migration has too often driven fear and uncertainty, how are our communities confidently to witness joyfully to a prophetic hope in the name of God? Our communities challenge the security-driven concerns of society arising from past and current wars and promote a society of solidarity and mutual justice. Three dominant thematic policy areas emerge from the simplicity and consequent witness to the healing. Repentance must begin with our communities first, allowing their minds to be renewed and transformed. First, hospitality. We heard about this image of the three angels that we also use in our tradition, Orthodox tradition, offering Christ's welcome to all, especially those feeling ignored, discriminated against, or oppressed by society amongst us, in our communities, in our countries, in our continents. Given the challenges of increased national populism in different countries, churches and communities maintain and further develop interfaith dialogue and cooperation. Second, justice, seeking to embody and commend justice shaped by grace and mercy, and this directs our attention towards environmental, economic, social, and ethical concerns for human rights and freedom of religion and belief. Last, hope, because we are drawn by hope, not driven by fear. Theological and other dialogues can help our communities articulate and live out whatever our circumstances and challenges, a form of bright building between people. And hospitality, justice, and hope are both the dynamic for and the lens through which our communities see all of its work. This is the theological anthropology that asks us what would make a good society. After having lived 2 world wars, we just celebrated the end of this First World War, we are called to be bridges builders. And we especially focus on the following challenges area of concern for our faithful witness: economic, climate change, security, arms and nonviolence, refugees and migration, human rights, peace building and reconciliation. Economic and climate justice. Everyone is affected by climate change, a result of global warming. And the combination of growing population and climate change is one of the most pressing challenges our world faces in the 21st century. Today, it is the poorest who suffer the most to adapt to climate change, including extreme weather, lack of food, and loss of land. Security, arms, and nonviolence. Security is a basic human need, and everyone longs for and needs security personally, socially, and politically. Arms development, production, and export carried out regardless of national and international rules and legislation is a central reason for outbreak, perpetuation, and continuation of armed conflict and war. Refugees and migration. The mass movement and displacement of people touches all religious communities and peoples in the world today. Economic conditions, climate change, youth unemployment prompt many people to leave their homes in search for better lives elsewhere. Persecution, conflict, and war force further millions around the world to flee and seek safety in neighboring lands, often for lengthy periods in refugee camps and countries willing to take them in. To continue building religious pluralism and civil peace requires that we, as religious communities, set signs of hope rather than spreading fears. Human rights. As you know, all religious communities were in the forefront of the humanitarian crisis requiring the most attention in 2018, including those caused by the different conflicts around the world. In our role of reconciliation and peace building, our participation in God's mission in and for the world. Reconciliation and peace, therefore, are not private and individualistic pursuits. The witness to and the practice of peace is public, and peace witness is public theology in action. Reconciliation entails building relationships and requires the change and transformation of our social structures. And as responsible actors in civil society, all our communities do their theology and peace building in the public arena. And this means that this critical voice, when necessary, envisioning an alternative world were required, and it articulates a hope-filled voice. As my Patriarch, His Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew once said, we who believe in one personal God have the experience of His love and His peace that takes root in our soul and fulfills and gives rest to it once the communion between the personal existence of the humble human being and of the great God are restored. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Metropolitan Emmanuel. I now want to call on each of the speakers in turn to have a 1-minute comment if they have, starting with Dr. Hanafi.
Thank you so much. في الحقيقة رح جيب مثال على كيف نحط شروط أساسية للتعددية الدينية. أنا بدرس مادة اسمها العدالة الانتقالية في الجامعة الأمريكية في بيروت. العدالة في دراسة هامة جدا بالعدالة الانتقالية على أهمية السلطات الدينية في حل النزاعات، ولكن أظهرت هذه الدراسة بأنه بقدر ما تكون هذه السلطات الدينية مستقلة عن السلطات السياسية تلعب دور أساسي في حل النزاعات وفي تمكين التعددية الدينية. إذن هناك شروط لازم نفكر فيها بكيف نطبق مفاهيم هامة مثل التعددية الدينية أو حلف الفضول. رح جيب مثال من لبنان. لبنان في الحقيقة الفترة الخمس ست سنوات الماضية لعبت دور دار الإفتاء وهيئة علماء المسلمين في لبنان دور أساسي بحل نزاعات بين أطراف مختلفة العلاقة بالانتفاضة السورية. إذن هون أنا بشوف دورنا بعدم فصل السياسي عن الديني بهذا المعنى، ونفس الكلام فيني أقوله على أنه الكلام يلي سمعته امبارح لما أحد المتكلمين قال أنه الحقوق الفلسطينيين في القدس هي حقوق فردية. في الحقيقة هذا كلام سياسي وحكى بإطار هذا المجمع الديني. إذن بدي أقول أنه لازم بدل ما أنه نرسم الحدود الواهية بين ما هو سياسي وما هو ديني، نعترف بأنه كلنا عم نحكي سياسي وكلنا عم نطبق أخلاقيات إسلامية، وبدنا نطبق الأخلاقيات الإسلامية على الدين، الأخلاقيات الدينية في الحقيقة إسلامية يهودية مسيحية إلى آخره. وبالتالي لازم نحط القضايا البنيوية مثل قضايا الاحتلال، الاستيطان إلى آخره على الطاولة، ونحن عم نحكي بأشياء دينية، مثل ما بطلب من السياسي ياخذ بالأخلاق الدينية لمجتمعه، بطلب من مجتمعنا الديني كمان أنه ياخذ القضايا البنيوية الأساسية مثل الفقر، مثل الاحتلال، مثل الاستعمار بعين الاعتبار.
Thank you, Dr. Hanafi. Dr. Kimmelman.
What you see in front of you today is an example of pluralism. Pluralism should not be confused with relativism. Pluralism allows me to make claims to the truth. But I realize in all humility that only God sees the whole truth. I, being a human being, can only see part of the truth. I am committed to my partial vision of the truth without believing that my partial vision of the truth exhausts the whole truth. That is why I am in need of your other perspectives, as we've seen in this panel, and we've seen throughout the conference. Together we complement a divine vision of truth. Separately, we are committed only to a partial vision of truth. Together, we can bring about the redemption. Separately, we will only bring about conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kimmelman. Dr. Yaffe.
Yes, thank you. Sheikh Abdullah challenged us in his speech to think about what we can do to operationalize projects and programs that can bring peace on the ground. Towards that, I had listed a number of examples where interfaith leaders had actually put into place peace negotiations, peace reconciliation. I would think it would be useful in some future forum to bring those individuals to the stage, to hear their lessons, in order to learn from them what is a good and what is the bad, lessons that can be learned for implementing things on the ground. There's a wealth of experience out there that we should all be tapping, and we all should be much more familiar with. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Seifel.
Thank you. What I've heard today, especially in the context of Sheikh bin Baya's keynote address, is that our theology must touch the ground. Believing without doing is worthless, and doing without believing is dangerous. So what does it look like? And I fully support what Mike has just said in the sense of having case studies where we can begin to operationalize in a comparative analysis about what different faith traditions have done in different spheres, beginning with the humanitarian sphere, but other spheres as well. The other thing that I would say is this, at least from within my own tradition, is I think the world's greatest threat to security is scriptural illiteracy. And that's where we really have to come together, in the words of Sheikh bin Baya, and not compromise by talking to each other. Pluralism is not syncretism. Good pluralism is covenantalism, because we're respecting the essence of the other's identity as they bring that irreconcilable portion of the truth to the table, even as we bring ours, and we agree to disagree agreeably. And then focus on the common values that we seek to implement, like peace and justice, compassion, mercy, and love. But we have to have concrete conversations about what that looks like in terms of how we do education on scriptural literacy, and we're aware of other traditions and what they're doing, and then we need case studies to begin to operationalize it in the most important spheres that we face together.
Thank you, Dr. Seipel. Metropolitan Emmanuel.
Thank you. Although I think that we've heard enough today, and we are all on the same page because we are all on the same boat. We are all traveling together, and this trip is without a syncretistic view, because we all agree, I think, on what we heard and what we said. If we spoke more or we spoke less, because sometimes even our silence is a way of teaching. But the thing is that if we are all willing to hear the message, to go back to school, if I could say, in our own way, to learn from each other, and to implement that in our everyday life. Because we cannot change, definitely, the world without changing ourselves. And this is the meaning of these meetings, that the change of ourselves will help change society and become a better world for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final word, one minute at the end, I am going to call up my teacher, Mustafa Seyrich.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Rabbi Wydząski, for this word. I think we as Muslims should not be silent what we heard from Chris. As a Bosnian who lived in the war and the peace and who saw Americans risking their life for my freedom in Bosnia, I just want to share with you your experience, and I am not in the position to apologize, but to say that we did understand your message today. Thank you for your honesty and your openness. And also, I would like to point to your ending observations, what we should do. And you said that we should read
books, the scriptures side by side and understand each other. I would like to share with you an experience of a great Muslim scholar, Shafi'i, Imam Shafi'i, who is the founder of the Muslim law. He was accused of heresy and was brought to the Caliph Harun Rashid to explain his heresy. And then when he came in front of the Caliph Harun Rashid asked him to talk about the Book of God. And then Imam Shafi'i, and I would like the Muslims to understand this message of Imam Shafi'i from the 8th century, when he said to Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, an ayyi kitabin min kutubillahi turid an atahaddas ilayk. On any, what book of God's you want me to talk about? Of course he knew that he wanted him to talk about the Quran, but he showed to the Amir al-Mu'mineen and that the Muslims must know all the books of God. So he asked the Caliph Harun Rashid, on any about of these books you want me to talk to you. Unfortunately, Muslims ulama today, I am not sure that they are on the level of Imam Shafi'i. And if we learn anything from our Sheikh, Maulana, teacher, Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya, is to understand that his message is the same as the message of Imam Shafi'i. So that's the lesson of this conference and the conference in the future in this great country. Thank you.
Thank you, and I invite you all to lunch.